greetings, it's me, Jane Perrone, and On the Ledge is bloody well back. I'm trying not to do an evil laugh right here, but failing dismally. In today's show, 2 plants that are pickly and delicious. Don't eat them though. Please don't eat them. But we're talking about 2 succulents, both known as the pickle plant, that are definitely worth a look if you're thinking of adding to your sunny plant collection. And I'll be letting you in on the return of On the Ledge, what it all means, and updating you on my own planty journey. So where to start? Well, last week I got made redundant from my job. So what started out as a normal working day rapidly turned into me crying on a Slack call. But you know me, I'm resilient. I'm a resilient woman. And I went out for a walk and I wrote some notes. I've got a new notebook. A new redundancy notebook, which is starting to fill up with ideas. And of course, the first idea was bringing back this here podcast because I've really, really missed it. So much has changed in the past 9 years since I started On the Ledge in 2017. But the one thing that hasn't changed is I absolutely adore plants, in particular indoor plants. My collection has fluctuated. My amount of time that I have to spend dealing with plants has fluctuated too. But yeah, I still just adore houseplants and love talking about them. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do, folks. So I would love your support. If this is your first episode or your 300 and something episode of listening to On the Ledge, thank you for being here, first of all. That's support right there. So thank you very much. If you are feeling sorry for me, which I hope that you don't, I hope that you just want to support an independent creator. I'm just going to list a few ways that you can support me if you feel so able to do so. You could just tell somebody about On the Ledge. I was walking my Cinnamon Trust dog the other day. So I walk a dog for the charity, the Cinnamon Trust, for its elderly owner. And I passed a guy who has this really beautiful houseplant collection in the window of his house. He was in the front garden and I just stopped and started talking to him about his plants and complimenting his collection. I just happened to slip in that I have a houseplant podcast, and within a few seconds, he's got his phone out and he's found me online. So these little connections can be amazing. So if you've got a planty friend that perhaps hasn't listened to On the Ledge, I'd love you to pass on that information to them. You can also buy my books. Legends of the Leaf is now self-published and available widely. The links will be in the show notes. The Atlas of Deadly Plants is widely available too. You can listen to them as audiobooks and listen to my 2 other audiobooks about allotments, The Allotment Keeper's Handbook and The Wild Garden by William Robinson. So perhaps pop over to your Spotify or your Audible or your audiobook app of choice, or borrow them from your library, your audiobook library or your print library. That's a great way of supporting me. And just to say, if any of you want a hardback copy of Legends of the Leaf, I do not have many left. I have, she looks at bookshelf, probably less than 6 copies available. And there won't be any more. There just won't be any more of these. That's it. That's all the supply gone. Those of you who know about the Unbound saga will remember that I've now self-published the book. So it's a new edition. It's paperback. The original hardback, there aren't going to be any more of them. It's got a beautiful foil cover. I will sign it for you. So if you want one of those, contact me directly. You can buy from eBay if you prefer. If you look up Legends of the Leaf, signed by author, you'll find it there. You can also join my Patreon, which is back up and running this month, and I'm going to make sure it is livelier than ever. I want to know what Patreon supporters want from me. I've just put up a post about Swedish ivy and Donald Trump. Imagine a mimed spitting sound right now. Go and read that post. It's free. You can go and read that post, whoever you are. It's all about a plant that used to be a historic feature of the White House and has disappeared. Plus there's going to be loads more coming up on Patreon, and you can join me as a free member or one of my 3 tiers of membership. I'd love to see you there. You can also leave a review for On the Ledge, rate and subscribe. That would be most welcome. And follow me on Instagram. I'm on TikTok as well, because I'm just down with the kids like that. Right, that's enough of bigging myself up. Let's get on with talking about what's coming up on the ledge. As yet, I'm not quite sure, because all this is very, very new, this new news that I have to pivot and pick up where I left off with On the Ledge. So if you've got some episode ideas, if you'd like to be interviewed, I'd love to hear from you. What would you like to hear on the Ledge? Fascinating Perone Jr. fact. When I was about 13, I guess, I was so in love with pickled onions that I bought a huge jar of pickled onions with my own pocket money and kept it in my room because my mum had told me that I was eating too many pickled onions. So I took matters into my own hands, of course, and bought a jar for my own personal use. God knows how offensive my breath was, but there we go. But I still love pickles of all kinds. Top tip here, unrelated to the podcast, is if you haven't ever tried pickled celery, really do try it, even if you don't like celery, because pickled celery is amazing. It's so good. But I wanted to talk about 2 plants that are called the pickle plant, in honour of both my love of pickles and also in honour of my work daughter Bryony, from the job I've just been made redundant from. One of the great joys of the job I've just been made redundant from was my wonderful colleagues, including Bryony, who is a wonderful individual, and we share a love of pickles. So yes, our Instagram exchanges usually consist of pickle related reels. We just love all things pickly. I just introduced her to, apologies for the terrible Italian pronunciation, lampassione, which are pickled muscari bulbs, a very particular species of muscari that Italians, I think it's in Puglia, they preserve these bulbs like pickled onions, and they're a particular taste. And I introduced Bryony to those. And she very kindly bought me one of the 2 pickle plants we're talking about for my birthday earlier this year. So it seemed an appropriate moment to chat pickle plants. And I'm going to be looking at 2 different species in this episode, both known as the pickle plant, both succulents, and both from South Africa. I wonder, in the case of both these plants, whether pickle plant is a fairly recently applied moniker, because I looked back in various succulent books trying to see when they were first called this name, and they don't seem to have been called pickle plant for very long. I have a suspicion that people think, oh, well, let's call it pickle plant and it will sell better to the pickle addicts. And they're probably right as well. But yeah, these plants have lots of other names too, some of which, I'm not going to lie, are a little bit odd, such as hedgehog sheep fig, which to me sounds like the name of, I don't know, maybe a peasant in one of those fantasy paperbacks that, you know, come in about 20 massively thick volumes. Here comes hedgehog sheep fig, the publican selling a yard of ale. I don't know. That's just the way my imagination works. Anyway, we'll come back to the names in a bit. Let's start with plant 1, And this is where scientific Latin comes in useful, because this is the only way we can tell exactly which plant we're talking about here, by using that double name to identify the plant. And the one we're talking about is Delosperma echinatum. Delosperma, you might recognise that genus name because this group of plant contains quite a few popular plants. Delosperma, the ice plants, they're widely known as, they're actually sold as bedding plants here in the UK. That's the species Delosperma cooperi, which are great for really, really sunny spots because they come from hot places. They do well in the summer in the UK, not winter hardy, however. And Delosperma is a member of the Mesemms family, the Azoaceae. Flippin' heck, some of these names. The Mesemms, let's call them that. So they have these daisy-looking flower heads in bright colours or sometimes in white, and they spread across the ground. They're ground-hugging, ground-cover plants. Now, echinatum, that means prickly. And indeed, this plant is prickly to look at. But the good thing is it's not going to do you any harm. Those prickles are soft and tactile. In fact, I have seen this plant marketed by a company, I'm not sure which one, with a label that says, "Hug me, I'm soft." So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend hugging these plants. They're a little bit fragile, but you can certainly run your finger across those soft prickles without any danger of harm. Talking about harm, this plant is declared safe for pets, so it is probably a good choice if you have nibblers in your midst. If you've read my book Legends of the Leaf, you'll know that I love digging up cultural and sociological stuff about plants, and this is no exception. I did discover that Delosperma is, according to the South African National Biodiversity Institute, important in KwaZulu-Natal, where it is one of a group of plants called Interlesi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, that are considered good luck plants. Botanically speaking, there's a few interesting things about these particular plants. And the first of those is its hydrocastic seed chambers. Gosh, we're getting back into the fantasy novel land again. What is a hydrocastic seed chamber? Well, it's basically an evolutionary adaptation that means that the seeds are only released when there is rainfall. In other words, when they're going to germinate. So the seed capsule opens up as soon as it's hit by rain to release the seeds. And then once the rain goes away, the seed capsule closes back up. This is not the only plant that does this. If you've read Legends of the Leaf, plug, you'll also know this is something that the stone plants, the lithops, do. It's a really fascinating adaptation that is definitely worth a mention. What are the flowers like? On this species, they are yellow, they're daisy-like. They're okay. You can see them in the show notes at the very top of the page. They're not bad, but I prefer the prickly leaves. And the reason why those leaves look as they do, almost sparkling in the sunshine, is because they're covered in vesicles. What is it with the botanical jargon, Jane? I know you're asking, but we need to know about vesicles. So these are basically lumpy bits all over the plant that store water. That's the non-technical explanation for a vesicle. And basically it's a water holding cell that helps the plant to keep water when there's not much of it around. That's why they look so prickly, but actually they are soft. And in China, it's known as spiny leaf dewdrop in translation, which fits the bill pretty well. Like the other members of this genus, it's a low-growing, sort of like semi-shrubby spreading plant. So it might get to 30, 40 centimetres tall, but it's going to spread more horizontally than vertically. And in terms of your care for this plant, let's get on to the key points here. A lot of people buy this plant just like they buy the string of pearls from a general houseplant shop, and it dies quite quickly. I would predict And this is completely off the top of the old dome. I don't have any stats to back this up, but my guess would be that at least half, if not 2/3 of the pickle plants purchased, Lord, that's hard to say, are going to die within about a year. And the reasons for this all come back to our old friend light. So this plant may well be being sold to you as a plant that doesn't need a lot of light. Wrong. It does need a lot of light. It comes from South Africa. It's growing close to the ground, so there may be some kind of vegetative cover that's blocking out some of the sun, but light levels outside in South Africa are going to be still enormously higher than in your living room, even if the plants have a little bit of vegetation cover. So you really do need to find a super sunny spot for this plant in your home, and you need to supplement with a grow light if you do not have that. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a plant that's very leggy, etiolated. That means just stretching towards the light. It's also going to cause you problems with the roots, because these plants are usually sold in a mix that's quite water retentive, which is fine in the nursery where they can provide those high light levels, but it's not going to work in your house. So take it out of the pot, knock off as much of the soil mix as possible and repot into cactus and succulent compost if you possibly can. I've got mine in a terracotta pot, which will also help those roots to stop getting saturated, which leads to root rot, which leads to plant death, which none of us want, let's be fair. So, sunniest windowsill, loads of light, and the usual rule for succulents. If you're in the UK or similar climes to me, that's going to mean a rest period November to March-ish, where you're reducing the watering, ideally reducing the temperature and keeping the plant quite dry. And then during the growing season, around now to October, you'll be increasing the watering and occasionally feeding too. Like the vast majority of succulents, its nutrient needs are low because it has evolved to cope in a low nutrient environment. So if you can get some cactus and succulent feed and use that every so often when the plant is actively growing, great. That will help it to grow. And it can grow quite fast. As I said, I think the name pickle plant is probably a marketer's idea in the last few years, but it's also got lots of other names, including the not very inspiring prickly-leaved delosperma and the aforementioned hedgehog sheep fig. I'm guessing because they're eaten by sheep. If you want to make more, you should be able to propagate from a stem cutting. I found them to be a little bit tricksy in this regard. The best advice I can give you is to nip off a piece of stem and then allow it to callus over to dry out for a couple of days before putting it in some gritty compost, and it should root. That said, as I say, sometimes it just dies off for no reason. It's not quite as generous as, say, something like the jade plant Crassula ovata in making new plants. I've read quite a lot on Facebook forums about people struggling, and I too have struggled with propagating this one. So if anyone's had great success, mine seems to be just random, but if anyone's had any great success and has some tips, please share them with the group. Oh, and I should say, talking about propagation, that the Sow Along will be back in 2026. So get some houseplant seeds now, because we're going to be talking Sow Along in the not too distant future. If you're new to the show, that means our annual effort to grow houseplants from seed. Yes, it is possible. Yes, it's exciting. Yes, you can join us. So yeah, check back on my website, janeperrone.com. Just put in Sow Along and you'll find out some information there about previous Sow Alongs if you can't wait to get started. And on with plant number 2. This is the other pickle plant. Now, when you think about a pickle, I don't know what pickle you're thinking of, but certainly the Delosperma, the plant we've just talked about, to me looks like a tiny gherkin, or if we want to be fancy, a cornichon. Whereas this plant, number 2, I don't know, I guess it more resembles one of those massive gherkins that you get in a big jar, or increasingly one of those, trendy pickles that comes in a little zipped bag, plastic bag. Have you seen those? Do you know what I'm talking about? Kind of bizarre, but very popular, and I've enjoyed a few myself. But if this plant really was a large gherkin, it would be one that's been on the old Ozempic, because it's extremely thin. So each little stem is pencil sized, I guess we might say, slightly chunky pencil sized at best. They are quite fast growers, and they have these ribbed structures which, as I say, give them a kind of a gherkin-y type look. Although the scientific Latin name, Kleinia stapeliformis, is telling us that the plant looks like a stapelia, not a gherkin. I don't know what the Latin for gherkin is. Answers on a postcard, please. But this plant has loads of names. It's called pickle plant. It's also called candle plant. I should point out that on the RHS website, they call it the stapelioid Kleinia, which I guess is a more accurate name than the pickle plant, but a bit less marketable, I suppose. Now, I can't quite remember which website this was on, but I have seen this plant called the Belisha beacon plant. Belisha beacon plant? Are you actually kidding me? I'm going to have to even Google what a Belisha beacon is, because I've kind of forgotten. Belisha beacon. Okay. So this is a British thing, so again, it's probably worth me telling you. So it's a plant that has a flashing amber globe atop a black and white striped pole. It's a crossing pole, basically, that you get in various parts of the world, including the UK. And I guess that's because of the flowers. So you get this pickle-like stem, and then at the top, the orangey red inflorescence pokes out at the top, and I guess that's the bit that looks like the orange flashing light on the top of a Belisha beacon. Wow, I mean, I'm not going to be calling that plant that name anytime soon, but it's absolutely up to you. Common names are interchangeable. We're just going to call it the Kleinia pickle plant for now, just for the sake of differentiating from the first plant we talked about. So yeah, it has a lot of things in common with the Delosperma. Also from South Africa, also a plant that lives in a spreading fashion, doesn't get very tall, so it might get, what are we talking about here? 25, maximum 30 centimetres tall. In its native home, it would not get hugely tall because of lack of water and high sunlight. So if your plant does get terribly long and tall and floppy, that means it's not doing well and it needs more light. So not a giant plant. It's growing in the underbush in South Africa. It's got a bit of a Dr. Seuss feel, actually, thinking about it, the way that flower is structured. If you have a look on the show notes at janeperrone.com, you'll see a picture. It's described in the Timber Press Guide to Succulent Plants of the World as a striped dead stick with a bright pom-pom inflorescence, which I guess is another way of saying a Belisha beacon plant. This plant used to be a member of the Senesioes, but it was moved to Kleinia because Senesio is one of those mega genera that is just absolutely huge, and so plants are being removed from it because it's just so enormous. So it's often still described as a Senesio, but the current name for it is Kleinia. There are about 50 odd species in this genus of Kleinia. I will link in the show notes to a nice paper by the wonderful Colin Walker from the British Cactus and Succulent Journal, which talks about various species in the genus, including our Stapeliiformis friend. And Colin notes that they make good plants for bonsai style presentation. So if you fancy a bonsai succulent, this is a good one to go for. In that article, I also had my head turned by another species of Kleinia obesa, which is from Yemen, and it has a thickened stem, which its describer, the French explorer and botanist Albert Deflaire, likened to a sausage, apparently, but Colin thinks it looks more like a cucumber. Anyway, I really like the look of this plant. It's very weird. I don't think it's probably widely commercially available, but one to look out for, Kleinia obesa. Do have a look at that article. It's really full of interesting pictures and descriptions of other plants in the Kleinia genus. And in terms of the care instructions for this one, very similar to the Delosperma, South African succulent. So we're thinking high light, we're thinking good drainage. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with super thin stems that are going to topple over. Spindly is the word that you might want to use to describe the look you'll end up with. Do not believe the bright indirect light brigade trying to sell you plants, because they're lying about this one. Well, perhaps they're not lying, perhaps they just don't know any better. But yes, it's a highlight plant. So if your plant's toppling over or going all squishy, that's what it's caused by, is the lack of light. So I've been talking about stems, and you may have realised that, like a lot of succulents, this plant has evolved to ditch the leaves. Well, almost ditch the leaves, because if you look along the stem, you'll see there are these little structures, a bit like a little scale, that are the vestiges of leaves where the plants evolved to make them smaller and smaller. So the stem is doing the photosynthesis, and those scale-like leaf structures remain more or less as a bit of a decoration. And just like the Delosperma, if you do buy this and the potting mix that it's in looks heavy, does not look suitably well drained, then do repot. And now is a good time to get repotting with some free draining potting mix suitable for cacti and succulents. You'll note when you take this plant out of the pot that it has these very thick rhizomes under the ground, and that's how it's spreading, by just snaking underground and making new plants, a bit like Sansevieria, as we should be calling them now, Dracaena, Trifasciata, and the other members of the what was once known as the Sansevierias. And if you want to break off a bit of that rhizome, that's a good way to propagate this plant. Pot it up separately, and hey presto, you got a new plant. So that's the two pickle plants. Maybe there are other plants called pickle plants. Fill me in if you can think of one. But I'd love to know also which pickle is for you. Yes, I want you to pick a pickle. Do visit the show notes for links and pictures and so much more. If you want to join my Patreon, then I'll be doing an extra leaf episode where I'll be talking about where I'm at with my personal houseplant collection. Just to give you a little taster of that, I'll be talking about my Thai constellation, which I first bought in 2018 as a tiny plant. What's happening with it now? I'll also be talking about Marie Kondoing my collection and learning the art of letting go. And I'll also be talking about a very interesting paper by the succulent legend that was Gordon Rowley about unspecialization and why growing a range of different plants rather than obsessively collecting one particular kind of plant might be the way forward. Well, that's it for this episode of On the Ledge. Thank you for welcoming me back, and I will be back next week with another episode. Not sure what it will be about yet, but we'll figure it out, guys. We'll figure it out. And I would just love it right now if you could spare 30 seconds from your day to like the show, to subscribe, to send me an email saying, "Hi Jane, welcome back," to just glance at my Patreon, become a free member of my Patreon, or do something to support some other independent creator that you love. It doesn't have to be me. We really need your support right now. There's a lot of tough times in the world of content creation. And so, yeah, just reach out and show some love for your independent creators this week. I will be doing the same for the ones that I love. And yeah, it's a great feeling. Doesn't have to involve cash. It can just involve a click or a like or a subscribe. Right, I shall stop preaching at you now and leave you to enjoy your pickles in peace. Bye. The music you heard in this episode was Whistle by Benjamin Banger and The Road We Travelled When We Were Kids by Kumiku. Both tracks are licensed under Creative Commons. Visit the show notes for details.